Peace, world. How you doing? It's your brother Mikey Fever. Welcome to another episode of NYP Talk Show, the coolest, the most realest, rawest podcast within this conscious community space. We're here to spread love. We're not here for the drama. Peace to the gods. Peace to the Moor. Islam to the Moors. You know what I'm saying? Salam alaikum to the Nation of Islam and my Sunni Muslims. Peace to the ATR communities out there. Welcome. Don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. We got super chats. We have merch on our website. As you already know, we had this great brother on our show not too long ago who did a part one of why did Noble Drew Ali align us with the Moabites. Tonight is part two. Without further ado, family, give a warm welcome to our good brother, Maury L. Smith L. Okay.
Islam. I rise and give perfect praise to Allah, honest to Ali, honest to the Marcus Mosiah Garvey, honest to the first supreme grand chief of the Most High Secretary of America, Evan Neal, to my supreme grand chief, the present supreme grand chief, Keith Gabriel, honest to all Moors watching, all Moors on the call, everything Moors, honest to everybody. Man, excited to be back, excited to continue to build on this topic, man, because it's a very important topic. So, if you got questions, let's dive right into it.
Oh, definitely, most definitely. Let me just connect this sound because we were jamming out to a little Lupe earlier. You know what I'm saying? how to get the energy flowing. So we already got into the who Noble Drew Ali, his mission, what his mission was, the agenda of uplifting our people, humanity, to bring them back into their natural state of human beings instead of being labeled as colored, Negro, etc., and to shift their consciousness, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, we got into the race origin, and we're gonna just keep going. We're gonna go right into it. How does identifying as a Moabite challenge mainstream racial categories?
Identifying a Moabite challenges mainstream racial categories is because right now in Western academia, right, people that look like you and me are like classified as sub-Saharan African. Right, and there's this divide that there are Africans that are below the Sahara that have nothing to do with Africans, above the Sahara, which is completely false because the Prophet is not only giving us, dominion and habitation in West Africa, but he's also placing us into the nexus and complex that was the Afro-Asiatic world, where Egypt, Canaan, the Levant, Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and Arabia all met and exchanged technology, exchanged religion, exchanged trade. Like that area, that part of the world is so important is because it's smack dab in the middle. Whoever controls that area can control products coming from India and China and products coming from Egypt and the Mediterranean going east. So, that area is a very vital choke point for global trade, even going back, 3,000-4,000 plus years.
Got you. Ooh.
Right. So, the Prophet putting us right there is like, no, we also have a stake in the ancient Afro-Asiatic world. We have a stake in ancient Egypt. We have a stake in ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Levant, ancient Arabia. We were there. So the Prophet putting us right there is also, again, right, making sure that we are represented properly in history, being a part of the founders of civilization.
That's a fact. I'm glad that you mentioned that because, depending on a person's capacity at studying, a lot of people think the origin of our people started, from slavery, or they just, whenever they think of Africa, they just go straight into Egypt. They forget other empires and other civilizations from Africa, and then like he go back further back, like you go into, like you said, Mesopotamia, going back further in time, saying that you were there, you were the origin, basically.
Yeah. Yes, sir. And then on top of that, right, if we want to look at it, I'll share my screen for a second, and then maybe be able to guide some of your questions. So let me see. Let me go here. Oh, so this is called the Albalu stelae. right? It's found in the land of Moab. It's been dated anywhere between 1309
I don't
BCE.
see it yet.
50,
You can share it. Present.
you can't see it?
You could just.
Oh, okay, hold on. Here we go. I moved too early. Can you see it now?
Got you right now. Boom.
Yes, sir. So check this out. This was found in the land of Moab. As you can see, you see the Egyptian iconography, right? The headdresses. You also can see like maybe like a crescent symbol in here. But this was found in Moab going back to the late Bronze Age, 1309 to about 1151 BC. So what's important is understanding that during this time period in the New Kingdom period of Egypt, the New Kingdom period is the periods where you have rulers like Akhenaten, rulers like Tutankhamun, Amenhotep, and then the 19th, who was in the 18th dynasty. Then you got the 19th dynasty of Seti and Ramesses II, Ramesses III, etc. Right. So in this time period, particularly at the beginning of the start of the New Kingdom, Egypt actually controlled a large part of the Levant, as well as the Transjordan region before you get to Mesopotamia. So a lot of what is Canaanite culture is intimately intertwined with Egyptian culture. And because, for example, right, all of the Moabites, right, are a section of Canaanites, just like the Israelites are, just like the Ammonites and Arameans, all of these different, what you would say, nations that descended from, the prophet Abraham, peace and blessings be upon him, and his descendants, right? These different nations were basically Canaanite in principle. And what I mean by that is, right, they spoke a Canaanite type language. The only differences between the Moabite language and the Hebrew language is dialect. It's the same exact alphabet that goes back to the Phoenician alphabet or the Canaanite alphabet, to be more proper, right? So the world from which the nation of Moab comes out of prominently is built on the bedrock of an Egyptian Canaanite cultural complex, right? So when we think about the prophet is telling us that, yes, we are Moabites, Canaanites. He also tells us that he was an Egyptian adept, right? So like, what does Egypt have to do with Canaan? What does Egypt have to do with Moabites? Here's the archaeological evidence right here, right? That, the culture and customs were very similar and also intimately intertwined going back thousands of years. So any questions or thoughts or anything come from that?
Yeah, I like that right there. Like, what's the name of this
The Al-Balua stelae, as they say.
And that's located in Western Museum out in Europe, right? I bet you.
They found it in Karak in present-day Jordan.
Nice.
Right. So the Moabite stone or the Misha stele is probably the most famous archaeological piece that's relegated to Moab. But this site right here, Al-Balua, is also very important because you can see in stone we see Moabite people depicted again wearing Egyptian clothing.
All right, so this is perfect for this question right here.
Yeah,
we see that the iconography and coming from Moabites and the language connection of language from Moabites and what else you said?
The language, the customs, even the religious system.
Got you. So how have the interpretations of this identity evolved over time? Like Noble Drew Ali was taking us from different stages, but how has it evolved? Like where did the break happen at? Like we would know, but then after that we had to go back and dig more, like through like mistranslation and stuff like that.
Well,
I don't know if I'm wording correctly, but something like along that way.
Yeah, I mean, every time a nation rises and falls, its population pretty much gets assimilated into the rising population. right? So, the Moabites, again, the prophet tells us this, right? That, we are descendants from the Moabites, Canaanites, Hamathites who were kicked out of the land of Canaan by Joshua, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a story of displacement, right? So usually, again, right, when people are being displaced, they're either exiled, forced out of the country, or they're usually assimilated and their identity gets taken over by that function as well. So like over time, going through these different phases of, being Canaanites and Egyptians and, later on to Moabites. And then from after the Moabites, you have connections to people like historically called the Nabateans or the Manaeans, right? And then these people get connected to people like from Himyar. And now you have stories of migrations coming from Yemen and Southern Arabia and Transjordan and things like that. They also are moving west towards, right, Morocco, Algeria, Senegal, Mauritania, and these places. So the reason why over time, right, when we try to look at it in a historical way, why certain names change is because political regime changes throughout time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's usually that, like, for example, right, the last pharaoh, Cleopatra was the last pharaoh of Rome. And then after that, there were no pharaohs. Why? Well, because Rome took over Egypt and, cut out a lot of ancient Egyptian customs for Roman customs.
Mm.
So throughout time, something like that happens.
You gotta cut out because I can't hear you, brother.
You can't hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, yes, sir.
All right. So, which empires interacted with the Moabites?
So the more,
Yeah.
yes, sir. So the Moabites interacted with ancient Egypt. They
Mm-hmm.
interacted with the Assyrian Empire. They
Mm-hmm.
interacted with their brother cousin nations like the Israelites, the Kingdom of Judah, the Aramaeans, the Midianites, the Edomites. All of these different nations were, like I said, like they were a part of the same pretty much cultural complex. Again, the only real difference was dialect as far as like how they spoke, but then they had the same words, the trade, the same trade routes. For example, the trade routes that were famous in Moab was the incense trade route that was coming
Okay.
from the south, and then you
Mm-hmm.
also had this thing called King's Highway that was coming from Egypt, out of Egypt into the Transjordan region, into Moab, north to Syria, Damascus, and even parts of southern Anatolia, right? So this constant trade network going in and throughout Moab is what made the surrounding nations to Moab very similar, right? It's almost just like if Canaan was the United States, Moab was Texas, Israel was California, Edom was Louisiana. You see what I'm saying? But they were all basically American. They were all basically Canaanites with their own independent twist, if you will.
So, would they be considered Semites?
The Moabites are Semites. So the
Uh,
Moabites, they are descend from Lot in the biblical story, who is the nephew of Abraham,
yes.
who was also a prophet himself. The
I
prophet.
only ask that because just for the listeners, because people tend to think like when you say Semite, it alludes to a different group of people.
Yeah.
People. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Yes, 100%. And then too, to that point, we kind of made last episode. There
Mm-hmm.
was a reason why Moab was the nation from the line of Semites that was relegated to us because of Moab's stance within the biblical story, as well as again its archaeological evidence. Right? When we look at Moab in the biblical story, the Moabites are tied to Abraham. Abraham went to save his nephew, right? The
Mm-hmm.
Moabites are tied to Ruth, the matriarch of the house of Judah, of the house of David, right? So the Moabites are intimate and close to the covenant covenant story.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Who was Chemosh?
Awesome, great question. So boom, I brought him down here. This is actually a possible depiction of Chemosh as a warrior god, right? Chemosh. So, and during this time, what was going on is what they like. It's what like a lot of historians call like henotheism. And what they mean by henotheism is basically like nations like the Israelites, the Ammonites, the Edomites, the Midianites, the Arameans, and things like that, right? They all kind of knew the pantheon of gods and chose like their own god to represent their people, right? So Chemosh was the god chosen by the Moabites, a warrior god to represent the Moabite people. However, the term Chemosh actually has connections to the ancient sun god of Mesopotamia, Shamash, and then he's also connected to Samos, which is the sun god Samos, the sun goddess of Arabia, and you also have like variations of the name of the sun god being called that also in Hittite territory as well. So like this term Chemosh comes from older gods as well, going back into Chemosh of ancient Mesopotamia. Chemosh has also been connected to Astarte or Asherah. Asherah was a mother goddess that was even a mother goddess that has been found in archaeological evidence. That Asherah was also at one point in time the mother goddess of the Israelites. Asherah was also a mother goddess in the Canaanite pantheon as well. So it's just like, again, once you start to see like the interwoven of religion and how these these supposedly different nations worship the same basically ideals, they just had their own system of defining it for themselves as a character for the people. We really start to see the interconnections that, you know, these are all the same people. They just have different regional dialects and styles, just like we do today, right? You from New York, I'm from Chicago. We can understand each other, but then, you know, when you talk to your New York homies and I talk to my Chicago homies, we can understand each other better.
Got you.
Yeah.
So how was like, I want to know more the mystery systems as far as the mystery systems, education, the daily life, diet, like can you go
Moab?
into that? Yeah, the Moab on the Moabite.
So looking at it, right? So the mystery system in general, again, I'm glad we connecting this because the cultural complex of this area is stemming back to an ancient Egypt Canaan connection, right? So when we look at what the mystery system is, I want everybody to look this up. It's called the Shabaka stone. You familiar with that?
I heard of Shabaka stone, yes.
Yeah, the Shabaka stone. So the Shabaka stone basically says that like the Memphite theology is basically the oldest theology of ancient Egypt, right? And if anybody's familiar with the Memphite theology, they're talking about Ptah, right? And Ptah, right, is actually like the god of gods in ancient Egypt, like over Ra, over Amun, over Atum, right? Because it is Ptah, right? Everybody else has a symbol of like the sun or coming out of chaos and all of these different things.
Exactly.
But it's with Ptah is that like Ptah created the world through his mind, through his word, from his heart. Right? Very similar to the Moorish American approach of man is a thought of Allah. Right? So the Ptah, basically Memphite theology was an intelligence first theology. Right? So in understanding that, then once we get from Ptah and then get into somebody like a Thoth, right, who then now becomes like the god of writing and magic and medicine and all of these different things, And Thoth's name in Canaanite is Tautus.
Okay.
Right? So like these same Egyptian figures are in the Canaanite pantheon,
Yes.
right? And then now Moab, remember, so for again to understand this, right? Moab is the son of Lot. Lot is the nephew of Abraham. Remember I was saying last episode how Abraham, basically the Hebrews, right? The people related to Abraham, etc. They were in a confederation with Amorites, which is basically the largest tribe of Canaanites. So a lot of religious rituals and practices and things like that are coming down into Moab from Canaan, basically from Egypt and then Mesopotamia on the other end. So it's like these Canaanite nations who are in between Egypt and Mesopotamia, they are like the bridge and the blend between these two ancient civilizations as well.
Gotcha.
Right. So when we're looking at the mystery system of these people, a lot of it was, of course, from archaeological evidence and things like that. They're doing rituals. Incense was a part of the rituals. Some of the stories talk about sacrifices and all of these different things, right? So it's just like at that time, what the Moabite religion, mystery system, educational system, intellectual system, etc., is still coming out of this Egyptian Canaanite system that's going back to 4000 BC.
Got you.
Plus.
So, let's stay on this a little bit. So I'm glad that you brought that up. How were the Moabites portrayed in medieval Christian teachings? Because
so the Moabites were, basically treated as others. So this is a great question because we kind of touched on this on the last video. Literally, the Moorish kings and medieval chronicles by Alfonso and other Iberian Catholic rulers basically called the Moors, the Almoravids and things like that, Moabites, right? Because they seen themselves like basically Israelites, and that since Christians and Muslims were at war in the Iberian Peninsula, right? They put that same label on us to kind of put themselves as the position of being the Israelites. So now anybody that's a Moabite, a Amalekite, an Amorite, etc., has now taken basically the label as the enemy of their state. But the key thing is that again, even though they're calling the Moabites as a slur and out of spite, again, you're connecting people in Northwest Africa to a people that goes back further east. And that's the real gem about it all, is that again, West Africa was intimately connected with what we call today the Middle East.
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
That.
You know what I mean? So it's just like there, without a doubt, we know that the Carthaginian culture that's coming from Canaan that became a staple in Northwest Africa has a tremendous influence on Northwest Africa. So even the same thing, like a god like Chemosh, who's a warrior god, in Canaanite, his equivalent would have been Baal. Right? So now Baal goes from being Baal in Canaan to being Baal Haman in Carthage. You see what I'm saying? So it's just like, if we understand like what these things represent systematically, you're able to see how things got transferred over throughout time.
Now you see it, man. Even down to the ATR religions that would, they call theirs myth, Greek mythology and stuff. But it's the same God concept. Like, hold up, this is from the Orishas.
Yeah,
that concept. So okay, I got
myths are only really explaining truth.
Yeah,
they're only really trying to these myths. These myths were technology to save the truth and the origins of things.
Yeah, truly. The lies, truth is in plain sight. It just
in plain sight.
Just put a spin on it.
Yeah.
Did the Crusaders encounter land historically associated with Moab?
The
You know,
Crusaders founded the land that historically associated with Moab. So we touched on this a little bit last session, but I believe it was actually Pedro de Santander, who was a member of the court of Spain, who was sending letters back to the king of Spain in like the mid 1500s, right? And in this letter, he said he's talking about La Florida, which was not the Florida that we know today, but Florida, the Carolinas, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, parts of Texas, northern Mexico. That basically that whole Gulf region was La Florida to the early Spanish explorers, and they said that this land was relegated. This was the land of the Moabites, Amorites, and that they were, because they are idolaters, right? They have the power to take the land from them. So this is the mindset that the Spanish had coming to the Americas.
That's oh, okay, got you.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, even if we want to look at it, like somebody could say, well, they like I was saying earlier, they were just calling them Moabites. They were just calling them, you know what I mean, Amorites, etc. But again, you're talking about a people with origins in the East. Even though you're using biblical words, because they were putting themselves in, a biblical seat and connecting themselves to Israel, Jesus, etc. You're still talking about a people with connections to the East.
That makes sense.
The Moabites are real people. As we can see, we have the archaeological evidence.
No, I see it. If you could go through them more, like each item if you can.
Yeah.
The breakdown.
So I showed you the first two. This next item is a depiction of a Shesu prisoner. This is from Ramses III reliefs at Medina Habu. Right now, the Shesu is also an interesting subject in historical academia, because you have different groups of the Shesu, and there's actually one group of Shesu who's called like the Shesu of Yahweh, basically. All right. So again, what we have to understand, and not to go off on a tangent, but I'm gonna tie this in, is that even the Bible tells you that the Israelites didn't worship Yahweh first.
Who they worship?
That the worship of Yahweh actually came from Midianites and Canaanites, and this process was given to the Israelites. The Bible speaks on this, where it says the Lord shone forth from Mount Seir, and the Lord came forth from Paran, which is Arabia, and all of these different things. So it's just like, even Yahweh was introduced to the Israelites. But to tie this point into, there were other groups. So the term Shesu just means those who travel on foot. So the Egyptians came up with this term for people that's in the Transjordan, Arabia, Southern Canaan region, because they were moving a lot on foot because of the trade routes and pastoralism. Right? So, but with that being said, again, right, if we're thinking about this, we have to think about this in retrospect, meaning that all of the descendants, the nations that descend from Abraham and his family, are related. So, archaeological wise, when we look at the evidence in the Middle and Late Bronze Age about the people who are occupying this land, right, you see a lot of similarities in how they dressed, in the culture, and all these different things, because these are related. You know what I'm saying? So you wouldn't necessarily find, right, Israelite customs and iconography and things like that in the Middle Bronze Age, in the early Bronze Age, because the nation didn't form yet. Like when the Bible is talking about Abraham and people, there is no Israel, right? So what you would see archaeologically wise is Amorite stuff, right? Because what they've done is they've attached this story to real archaeological evidence. You know what I'm saying?
Man, it sound like Noble Drew Ali had a lot going on, man, to do something like that. That's
to that point, because so the prophet is like literally now, again, right? The prophet had to basically recraft our story. Because let me tell you why. Because again, we don't just descend from one tribe. So it's just not like we can't just like, oh, we're all Yoruba, so now we just gotta go you see what I'm saying? Go through the Yoruba line. It's like no, like we descend from people from Yoruba descent, from Fulani descent, to Sanhaja descent, from Malian descent, from Akan descent, from you see what I'm saying? So it's like now we have to understand, okay, all of these different ethnic groups that we descend from, some have different origins, and a lot of them have origins that's going back, pointing towards the east. You see what I'm saying? So it's just like through each era of time, the different ethnic groups that we descend from occupied different areas, which created different, trade networks and things like that. Everything goes back to trade. So in the West, you had trans-Saharan, the trans-Saharan trade. In the East, you had the incense trade, the King's Highway. So these things were interconnecting the people, right? So it's just like if the Israelites wanted to, or the Moabites wanted to get some money, right? They have to control the routes, which started the wars, and then now you get the biblical stories from that, from actual real happenings.
Got you. I got you. Okay, so that makes sense. So it's like it's a basically we could reference what's going on today to what happened in the past, or vice versa.
Exactly
with the whole hormones oil control thing. It's like, oh
yeah, same.
This is a repeat. This is a repeat.
It was a global economy.
Got you.
Back then, and we all participated in it, and that's why again the prophet is aligning us with this, because if you take us out of this, we're losing part of our blueprint to rebuild ourselves,
to restructuring the sovereignty
exactly.
Itself. So that's the real sovereignty right there. Not and no disrespect to the Moors out there that do that paperwork stuff. It's maybe part of it too. I don't want to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I see what he was saying. It's like remove yourself from that, calling yourself Negro, black, colored, get back to your original self, have that paradigm shift in the mind, right? You see where you come from and know that you were here. You are, as they say, you're the originator, the landowner, land patent, everything else is you. But you just lost your way.
Right. He said, what your forefathers were, you are today. Gotcha. Right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, who are our forefathers? Well, our forefathers were traders, they were farmers, they were metal workers, they were scientists, they were lawyers, right? So understanding that now we can, and that's the beauty of it, we can study who we are for thousands of years.
You know, that's to me, it's a great thing.
Yeah.
But it'll be difficult for people in today's day and age. Some people, because they cannot buy it, because, again, it goes back to the amount of information that you receive, and if it's the correct information within your study.
Yes, sir.
The capacity to have discernment. They will look at the Moors and say, they were part of our slavery too. The Moors enslaved us, so why should I study that? Why should I study this and that? And, some people say, I see them online getting in trouble, or they doing these home grabs or whatsoever, not knowing that that's not what it's really about. Got you. So, go ahead. Yes, you good? You sure? All right. Somebody in the comment section said Islam. See, they shot me out.
Yes, sir. Islam.
Are Moabites used in modern identity debates?
Mm-hmm. Wait, that was you said? Is Moabite used in modern identity debates?
Yeah, Moabites used in modern identity debates. People like to debate. Now we have this thing on social media: FBA versus continental Africa versus diaspora Africa. But I've never heard somebody say, "I'm Moabite."
Yeah, and the reason why is, again, people don't understand the historical context.
Yeah,
They don't understand the connection. So you don't see people talking about, Moabites when it comes to identity debates and things like that, because they don't see the connection, right? But again, if we understand that as a people, we were, as the prophet was saying, right, their dominion and habitation extended from northeast across southwest Africa, right? So in understanding that, we can now again masterminds back into the ages, they can trace themselves. This is allowing us to trace ourselves so that we can literally get back to the things that will uplift us, get back to being ourselves.
Exactly.
Honestly, so it's just like, you won't hear more about in the debate because people don't really know that much about the Moabites. All right, so it's like now what we're doing with this video is tying it back together, because right when we say Moabites, the prophet never just said, I mean, a little bit. Let me change my statement. The prophet mentioned the Moabites, but it's a reason why the prophet also mentions Amorites, Hittites, Canaanites, Hamathites as well. He's actually pointing to what I was talking about, this same cultural complex. So the Moabites, right, the ancient Moabites are the Amorites, are the Canaanites. You know what I'm saying? Are, right, your people of Ad, the people that founded Mesopotamia and things like that. So now, like, he's tying us, he's giving us Moab as an anchor, but he's also tying us into the broader Amorite, Canaanite, Egyptian civilizations as a whole.
Got you.
The Moabite is the node, it's the entryway point.
Got you. So
Yeah.
did we speak about King Misha?
I think a little bit, but last time, but we go more into it.
Definitely.
Right? So King Misha went to war with Israel, and as the story says, the Moabites were losing until and again, we don't know exactly how it went down, but this is like what the commentary is saying, that basically Mesha sacrificed a whole bunch of people to end up beating the Israelites. And the Moabite stone, King Mesha, the Mesha stelae, talks about his victory over Israel. And it's also talked about, the Bible actually, I believe, tells a different story, that he lost. But we actually got the archaeological evidence of him creating a stone saying he won. Right? So again, when we start to look at like the biblical story, first off, we got to understand that Allah says that he revealed the Torah. Right? We're talking about the first 5 books. First, when we're talking about the Torah. But then understanding that,
yeah, brother, it kind of mumbles.
So, in the Quran of Mecca, Allah says he revealed the Torah.
Yeah.
Right? The Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and what's the other
one? First 5 books, you say?
Yeah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and his well, I believe it might be Numbers.
Numbers, okay. I
believe it's Numbers, right? So like these are like the first 5. These are like the first 5 books of the Bible, right? So Allah says he revealed the Torah, but at the same time, what we got to understand is over time, right? Over time, the text became edited for political reasons.
Of course.
Right? So that's why, and that explains the certain stories and interpretations that's in the Bible, right? Because a lot of it is being written, after the fact, and they're trying to basically position, why, their legitimacy, basically, right? Historically. So you have, give you an example. 2 times, basically, a man was raped in the Bible. The first time it talks about is with Judah and Tamar, and then also talks about with Lot and Moab. Well, why is that? Well, these two lines are in the line of David, who's supposed to be the greatest king of Israel.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? David's in the house of Judah. Judah married Tamar, a Canaanite woman. Then,
Mhm.
boom, his great grandmother is Ruth, who married his great grandfather Boaz. Both of these are in the line of Israel's greatest king, David. Right? So it's like if you have,
Ah.
you see what I'm saying? So if you have this Israelite hegemony mindset that was maybe going on 2,000 plus years ago, right?
Mhm.
How do they make sense of matriarchs outside of Israel being in the line of their greatest king? Well, you have to run the smear campaign on the
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
This is a political tool. Well, I'm not saying it's wrong or right. I'm saying it was a political tool.
Same tactic used today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, so when we start to put things in context with how things run today, it's like, that makes sense.
Makes sense. And you say they're raped, so that's the butt breaking process.
You know what I'm saying? Like they got them drunk. You feel what I'm saying? And supposedly, you feel me, got them to, in them. You see what I'm saying? But like those are two. It's interesting that those are like the two stories in the Bible, and they all deal with people that's in the line of David.
It's crazy, man. How did the Moab political structure function?
Say that again.
How did that political structure function at that time?
I mean, so the Moabites at the time, they were in like it was a divine kingship model,
Okay.
right? So for example, King Mesha, right, was basically, appointed by Chemosh to lead the people,
Got you.
right? And then of course you had your priests and things like that as well. Like for example, a connection that's actually very important to bring up is the connection between the Moabites, the Midianites, and the Arameans when Moses and the Israelites were trying to pass through the land of Moab, right? And they tried to recruit the prophet Balaam to put a curse on the Israelites. You know what I'm saying? So one, the Bible is telling you that there were prophets outside of the main Israelite line. Two, the Midianites and the Moabites worked together. They were in confederation. And why that's important is that the Midianites' land started in the plains of Moab all the way down to Tabuk, the city Tabuk, which is in the Hijaz. So Tabuk is like this is the city further north from Medina, and then from Medina down to Mecca, right? So the Midianites, right, being connected with the Moabites and then the Arameans, is showing again how these people are the same people, just different nations. Like for example, again, the French and the English are related, even though they're different nations.
Exactly.
See what I'm saying? The same. So it's the same idea.
Got you. I got you. Yo, you over here, you rocking it, bro. We now, we tend when we hear of Moorish, we hear of Moorish, we think of architecture, mathematics, astronomy, sciences, right?
Yes, sir.
What types of homes, like architecture, did the Moabs build? Was it the same structure as the Moors, or was it different?
Oh, so yeah, so back in that time, you have different styles of homes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So looking at it, which is again an important thing, is that the Moabites were more sedentary than some of the nations that they were related to, like the Midianites, who were more pastoral in a way, moved on nomadic, moved on foot, right?
Yeah.
So the Moabites lived in a more sedentary system. So at that time, they probably lived in similar Canaanite homes, stone-built homes, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Look at that. Still clean with it. Look at them. Still clean with it. Still building. Still doing their thing.
Yes, sir.
I'm not gonna say it much, but you got a group out there that's still roaming. Anyway,
And,
you know what I'm saying?
I'm gonna stop sharing this. I'll do that.
I'm gonna stop sharing the screen.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I'll have them 3 images just to kind of show.
Oh, you want to share it again? Oh no, you good.
Huh?
You want to share it again, or you good?
If you got questions on it, because I only had those three images of Chemosh, the Balu stele, and then the stele of the Shesu to kind of show again the similar iconography.
All right, you're speaking of iconography, and as far as language and writing, what script did they use?
So the Moabites had they basically used the Phoenician Canaanite script, right? So like, and again, right, the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, is where the alphabet is coming out of, right? You see what I'm saying? So the Canaanites invented the alphabet, and then it basically got localized in the Moabite language, in the Israelite language, where you get Hebrew and Aramaic, right? Aramaic languages and things like that. So again, right, same cultural complex that's coming out of it. So it's like, even when we think about, we talked about this last show, what got passed down?
Yeah.
Basically, everything that came from Carthage into Northwest Africa and Southwest Africa came from the same, you know, being cultural complex that Moab was a part of, because the Moabites are Canaanites.
Got you. Are there any other to this day and age? Are there any excavations taking place right now to know more about the Moabite?
I don't know specifics, but I'm pretty sure they are still doing excavations in places like Jordan and things like that.
Jordan, yeah, because I find that odd. Like even like I'm glad you mentioned the region of Jordan, right? I remember when the U.S. went into Iraq in '03, and they was like going through the museums, like they was grabbing things out of the museum artifacts, and I'm like, I was looking at some of that artifacts, right? And what you would consider to be so-called Negro phenotype African, like that's what you saw that they were taking out the museums. I'm like, damn, it looks like our people, like the coil of the hair, the nose.
That stuff is worth what? Millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
Right. So think about this, right? And it's a flex in our community, like to buy art, right?
Yes.
You got a dope piece of art, that's a flex.
Yeah.
Right. But the ancient archaeological stuff is like that times 5.
Yeah.
Because it's thousands of, you see what I'm saying? So it's thousands of years old. So that lets you know, like, what is the value of culture?
It is. I'm glad you said it. The flex,
art.
Because people will buy the flex of the European art, right? And I'm like, I never hear them talking about buying archaeological stuff.
Yeah.
Only like I seen reference of that in that movie, although it was fictional, the Wakanda movie, the first one.
Yeah.
When Killmonger said that he stole that from it came from this region over he took it from.
I think he was talking about Benin, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was so powerful. He said it, but you took it just like everything else you took, and I was like, damn, that's so real. Yeah. Because I always question that. Like, I want to see more of these things, but it always end up in some museum out in Europe or here. I'm like, why won't we stay in this own region? Is it you think people won't value their own things or something like that? Like, I like to see those things because I feel like a sense of pride when I look at it. Like, damn, my people really did something.
Yeah, and the reason why they're not trying to come up off of it because it's part of their wealth as a people.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't rob our stuff and now made it a part of their wealth. The British Museum, the Louvre, all of these things.
Got you. So from what it sounds, we are descendants of Ruth. That's what he's saying, right? Of Lot and Ruth. That's what you're saying.
Ruth is definitely our symbolic matriarch. Yes.
Our symbolic matriarch. That's deep, bro. This sounds so similar to what the Hebrew Israelites be saying sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Although they be throwing me off when they be going off that tangent, but I'd be like, when you see a brother from Africa, they are quick to say, well, that's not my brother. He's not an Israelite whatsoever. What do you think that comes from?
Can you repeat the question?
Some Hebrew Israelites, right? Mm-hmm. I know they're gonna attack me for this, but they can see a brother in the street that's from like Africa or wherever the case is, and they'll be like, well, he's not my brother because he's not an Israelite. And I'm like, right. That's odd. Like, how do you view that?
I mean, that mindset is a part of their doctrine because it's like, we're the chosen people.
Yeah.
Right. So because if you're not a part of the chosen people, then you aren't my people. right? So it's that mindset that drives that type of thinking. You know what I mean? But like again, with us, when you look at the Moabites in the biblical history, in the biblical story, we always network with other nations. Right? Reasons why the prophet is aligning us again with Amorites, Hittites, Canaanites, Hamathites is because we got the archaeological evidence to show that we wore Egyptian type clothing.
Yeah.
You know? Even too, another thing we didn't mention on the last episode is that they even found archaeological evidence that the Moabites used the star and crescent on seals 3,000 years ago.
Yeah. I'm glad that you said that because I do see that in some ATR rituals. You will have that symbol there. Powerful, bro.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were there ever any peacetime with Israel?
Yeah, definitely. And that's why the biblical story is so confusing to people, is because at one point in time, right, the Moabites are our enemy. At another point in time, they're friends. You even also got right alliances happening. They're fighting together against Assyria. They're fighting apart with Syria. Like it depends. It's all about the interest at the time.
I got you. Okay. Because, being that you mentioned, we're talking about this, there's something that's coming to my mind, and forgive me, I'm just like trying to really wrap my head around this.
Yes, sir.
There's a part in Africa, Mauritania.
Yes, sir.
And I see, like, there's some peace amongst the Arab and should we call them what, Moabite descendants?
Yeah.
And there are some times of conflict. You think that's remnants of what took place in the past?
So those Arabs that moved into that area, they moved into that area in like around in between the 11th and 13th centuries. So once they moved into those areas, at first they were just basically it was cool with everybody. And then after some dynasties like the Almohads start to deteriorate, this is where you get the rise of these Arab tribes were originally Makil tribes, Maqil. So you have the Banu Suleiman and the Banu Hassan. So these are basically the principal Arab tribes that are in Mauritania today, right? So they basically came about in the medieval period. And actually, I think we talked about this last video too. The Arabization of Northwest Africa came at a head after the Shababa Wars, which was like 1670s or something like that. So it wasn't until after that like true Arabization took over Northwest Africa.
Got you. Man, I got so many questions, man. I don't know where to go.
Rapid fire. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. What role does faith play in Ruth's decision to follow Naomi? Does that have an impact on our people?
Yeah, because I mean, what Ruth's story is that it's not about like why you asked that Israelite question. It's not about like where you descend from. It's about your character. It's about who you are as an individual, and I think that's the disconnect with that community.
Got you.
It's about the character. It's about how you treat people. It's like I don't even have a problem with you saying like we the chosen people if you like intelligent and empathetic about it, not brash.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like character. It boils back down to character. So like Ruth is like probably again, right? This is a Moabite woman who has her own chapter in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, that's powerful right there. That says a lot by itself. Like the mother, always, you can't hide it right there. and even down to the name itself, like the root, like the root of it all. So
Root of
what
it all.
happened? How did we know, like, they say that we didn't follow the principles of our forefathers, we
Yes,
were
sir.
not disciplined whatsoever.
Yeah.
Um, but the decline of our people, man, like to a point where we can't reach that pinnacle again. What happened? Like, did it just happen through time, just gradually was taking place that we just lost our ways and just automatically said, okay, just call me a nigga, black, whatsoever. Like, what happened?
I mean, we measure time in cycle ages. So the prophet said that, the reason why the nationality of the Moors was taken away is because they honored not the creative principles of their forefathers. So when we're looking at, the Moorish Empire and why the Moorish Empire started to fall, it was due to infighting. And it was due to infighting because of ego politics, right? I'm from this line. I'm a descendant of the prophet. You're not. I'm this. You're not. You're that. I'm not that, right? So it was basically a lot of infighting. You're talking about infighting between brothers,
Hold on to that.
infighting
Hold on.
between father and
Hold that
son.
thought. Hold that thought. Hold that thought because that is what's happening a lot today. I
Yeah,
see it amongst, and I don't want to disrespect stuff on toes, so I'm gonna say it. I see a lot of infighting among so-called black groups. We got
yeah,
Moors versus Temple Moors versus Moors who deal with the law and whatsoever, and they are very disrespectful with one another.
yeah.
And you would have thought or assumed that they were on the same playing field of trying to uplift humanity and give our people back their identity and save humanity whatsoever. But no,
Yeah.
they're fighting about what came first, the chicken or the egg. My document is more real than your document. You're from this lineage of Moorish science, or you from that lineage, and they betrayed us, so we don't deal with them, and we have conflict. In every school of thought, there's like a division in every group, man.
Yeah.
I
Even
was like,
even in Christianity, even amongst the Protestants and evangelicals, there
mhm.
are there are schisms,
Oh yeah,
right? But I
yeah,
think that even in other cultures and nations, even after a schism, those people eventually learn how to work together. Like the Protestant church is a schism from breaking away from the Catholic church. But do you see Protestants and Catholics beefing?
no,
You
not
see
really,
what
no.
you see
No.
what I'm saying? Like, so we
It
have
depends on the
multiple
group. It
examples
depends
that
on the
we can
group.
look at. Huh?
Because it depends on the group. Because I know in Ireland they had issues amongst they had their religious wars in Ireland, right? But then
Yeah.
eventually they came together. But I see it mostly plagues our people. Our
And
people
that
are
was
very
that time.
devout,
That was
huh?
that time. And
Hmm.
the reason why the Irish and things like that were fighting the Catholics is because, the Catholic, again, the whole Protestant thing is like, it's also mixed into what happened with the Moors,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of Moors ended up becoming Protestant,
Hmm.
Huguenots, and things like that, right? So, they were at war during those times because of that time period. But now it's like, these groups are quote unquote at war due to our time period, but our time period is the residue of a lack of knowledge,
Got you.
a lack of knowledge, and a lack of destiny. And what I mean by that is where we're actually going and taking this.
Hmm. Yo, brother, we gotta do a part three. We gotta get into the destiny of what is the future destiny for
Yes, sir.
The Moabites.
Yes,
Because
sir.
because we did like a quick run through on part one and two of knowing the history of pinpoints. Because if we stay on this show, we could end up doing like a 4 hour show. But there's a lot to dissect, and I got questions. But I'm like, yo, there's too much to dissect in just one or two sittings. But the
Yeah.
part three I like to do is what is the end game for our
Yeah.
people? Because I respect all school of thoughts except cults. I don't do cults. Mikey don't do cults. I'm sorry, I don't deal with cults. Start talking that I'm from outer space stuff. I'm like, no, I hear that, and I'm gonna fall back. You know what I'm saying? I hear that. That sounds great.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It sounds good. I think you got to add a little twist to the story and make it interesting. But I
Yeah.
can't do it. But I like to know what works for our people because when I say our people, just not here within the U.S. United States of America. I'm talking about all over.
All over.
We're not monolithic, but what what is the end game for our people?
And,
I'm tired of. Go
but
ahead.
with that being said, it's like I want to talk to the point about what you're saying about like how we're not monolithic. You
Yeah.
know, our people, if we study our history, we can look at governments that were decentralized, and we
Mm-hmm.
can look at governments that were centralized, and
Mm-hmm.
understand that eventually we're gonna have to take a approach where it's decentralized in some areas, it's centralized in other areas,
Yeah, yeah. I
right?
like that. I like
You know
that.
what I mean? And it's really us understanding that us governing ourselves is not for control, but for upliftment. Like
Mm-hmm.
governance is about upliftment because it allows us to coordinate on a grander scale. And that's really all we're lacking. We're just lacking coordination.
Exactly.
We have everything. We have the smart people, we got the money, we got the
Mm-hmm.
minds. We just lack the coordination. That's
Exactly.
really it. And the lack of coordination is due to a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding about who we really are and our connection. Because more, right? We can look in the history of Moorish people and see Moors that were Catholic saints, Moors that were Islamic sheikhs, and Moors that were with the people of Judah.
Mm-hmm.
Like history and Moors that were with Yoruba and Voodoo priests. Like we
Yeah.
were everywhere.
We're everywhere.
You know
And
what
what
I
happened?
mean?
And what happened? That's what gets me because I'm like, yo, as the gods say, who's the black man that making the owner, creating the planet Earth, prophet, civilization, God, the universe. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Don't
Here's
quote me on
what
that, but
happened.
as they put it, no disrespect to them, but that right there always stood out to me. That one within the student enrollment, that one first question always stood out to me because it it explains everything.
Yeah,
You get what I'm saying? But
100%.
then what happened along the way where we know that the infighting took us down,
Yeah.
the outside influences, and being that we know that, we still perpetuate those same behaviors. I'm like, damn. So what is it? We fell in love with this kind of treatment and this way of living.
Yeah, and I think it's a part of again the overall system. And what I mean by that is that like our people are still in the mindset of like trying to make
Yeah, of course.
it. You know what I mean? We're
Yeah.
trying we're trying to quote unquote make it in this quote unquote white man world. And it's that mentality that is causing a lack of progress is because right we're putting individual success and individual progress over the group collective. It doesn't mean that individual success and progress isn't important, but again, it's about coordinating it because the biggest flex isn't. I'll just ask you a question. What's a
Okay.
bigger flex? You and Brother Ron with the Rolls Royce, or you and Brother Ron whole family with Rolls Royces?
The whole family
So
and
here's
our
what's
people.
going on: is that Asiatics that get money, that get power, are getting into rooms where they're by themselves, and people who can with money that can flex that they people also got money. It's a
Hmm.
numbers game. You see what I'm saying? Because young athletes and musicians are given millions of dollars at a young age to then now get into a system where they have to get a real estate agent, a lawyer, an accountant, a this, a that. And these people are all in the same network, but not from our community. So they're just being run through the mill like a car wash. Come
Exactly.
drop your money off here, come drop your money off there, come drop your. But if we had the system for ourselves for young athletes, it'd be a whole completely different story.
Of course, you control a narrative. You can certain things you
Exactly.
won't be able to do. We have our own base
Exactly.
whatsoever.
Exactly.
Brother, we gotta get you back for part 3 because we went over an hour and four
Yes, sir.
minutes and we could sit here forever. I appreciate you, man. You're one of the brilliant minds that we have on this platform,
Take that.
and I appreciate your contribution very much, man. Peace to you and your family
Thank you.
and those within your movement. To the chat, don't forget to comment, like, share, subscribe. Thank you for being involved, for leaving your questions and your comments. I appreciate that. Don't
Appreciate
forget to
that.
comment, like, share, and subscribe. Go ahead, brother.
Now saying to the chat, we appreciate y'all. Seriously.
Definitely.
I know the last video we did some numbers, and I appreciate that. Let's keep it going.
Oh, definitely. We're gonna keep going, there, man. That's what it's about, getting that information out. And definitely, we gotta. I want to plan something big, man. Get you and a few more, and we can sit down, some Asian Nation of Islam brothers, and we sit down and really come up with something that's you know, foreseeable for our people, man. We all need it. You know what I'm saying? Brothers need brothers, sisters need the sisters, because we got to do something about the youth out there that are dying at rapid numbers out there. It's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? While we online, George Jacket, fighting over doctrine, our children out here dying, and we got to do something about that.
See it every day, Mo.
Definitely, man. For real, man. I appreciate you, my brother.
Yes, sir. Peace and love. Mike, honest to NYP Talk Show. Everybody have a good evening.
Peace.